Well, it is that time of the morning when we take a look at some of the stories making headlines in newspapers around the world, and I'm joined once again by the social commentator Dorcas Gwata. Dorcas, let's start in Nigeria. This Day Live, the paper there, Buhari orders disposal of 9 presidential aircraft to cut cost. For years, the federal government has spent apparently over 12 billion naira annually for the maintenance of the presidential fleet. It's 9 planes, 12 billion naira. No wonder the country's finances have been a mess.
Buhari is following through in his first 100 days here what he said he would do. He said he would clamp down on corruption, and he said he would improve on governance issues. This is an example of that. I think we're seeing a different kind of leader here in Nigeria. He's a real grassroots man who has a vision on the issues on the ground rather than the issues just at the top. So I think he's setting an example. This is speaking very loudly to other African leaders. It is not unusual to have flamboyant, wealthy and indulgence in African leaders, often homes in Switzerland and wallets everywhere. So I think he's setting an example. I really like his leadership style. He is not without critics. The middle class and rich in Africa don't like these things because it shows them up. So I think it will be slightly unpopular with the wealthy and the rich, because when you clamp down into tax collections and these kind of issues, you may not have so much collaboration around them. But I like what he's doing.
And generally, it's good PR, isn't it? Doing stuff like this, it's not going to annoy anyone, is it? Showing that you're you don't think you're so high up that you need 9 planes.
Absolutely, and to be fair with him, to be fair with Buhari, he's never been an indulgent man, and he's never really been somebody who comes out in expensive clothes and overindulgence. His eye and his vision for the poor and the everyday Nigerian has always been clear. He has been a leader for quite a while. So I think he's learning his lessons and he's delivering. We like what we see in Africa.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's go to the UK paper, The Independent, the story of the day, really, which has a picture of worshippers in Charleston with the title America's Shame. It describes how the suspect had been given the gun by his parents for his 21st birthday. President Obama has since said this sort of violence doesn't happen in other places. He's tried to change gun laws in the States before. Is there any point trying again, because we've seen these awful tragedies in the past and they don't seem to have any effect?
Simon, the gun culture and the right to bear arms in America is almost absurd as it sounds. The right that we have here in the UK to go to the pub, that's a power it is. They absolutely maintain that they have the right to do that. But I think for me, America has 2 issues up front which they're dealing with. The issue of race and the issue of guns. And those 2 moving together are going to be very problematic. Obama's right. We've been here before. We've had these catastrophes. 2-3 weeks' time, we'll move on to the next story, and we'll move along without any critical change. So, yes, he's raising a very big issue in America. Will he mobilize Americans to change their thinking? In his term, I don't think he will, but he's setting the seeds. And I think in 20 years' time, we may be sitting here saying, well, actually, Obama started this discussion. They need to have a discussion, a real discussion about guns. And that means having to have difficult discussions about difficult issues, but that discussion is absolutely necessary.
Because knowing the gun lobby and how the stance they always take in America, they'll be saying things like, well, if these churchgoers all had guns, this wouldn't have happened.
It won't. And if Hillary takes office, and how will this discussion translate itself? It'll be very, very difficult. They're up against the anti-law. Those who support gun law in America stand on their ground that this is their right. They fail to see how easy it is for a 21-year-old man to have a gun. His father gave him a gun for his birthday. Unthinkable here in the UK. Absolutely unthinkable. But they maintain that this is their right. Very sad scenes in Charleston to observe in the last 24 hours. Very moving. He went into a church, a place of worship, and wreaked riot.
And also, the 2 aren't mutually exclusive, are they? You can have gun controls, but you can still have the right to bear arms. You can clamp down on gun controls and people who might be mentally unstable, and still allow that right. I don't see why you have to have one or the other. Well, let's move on to an American paper, the Wall Street Journal, which has the headline: Pope takes firm stance on climate change, firm stand on climate change. Pope Francis has accused the global market economy of plundering the earth at the expense of the poor and of future generations. He's right, of course, but will any leaders or governments or big corporations listen to him?
I think they ought to. I really like this guy. He's very grassroots. He's staying well away from the major political issues and moving in with issues that actually everyday people worry about. I've seen him move around the poor and, worshiping, kissing the feet of the very poor. He has a different kind of relationship with the poor and social issues. So I'm not surprised he's come up with this. They ought to, because he's in touch with those issues. And climate issues, in my view, when the world is so upside down, tend to be sidetracked, because we are so busy fighting terrorism and economies and migration. This is an important agenda, and it actually has an effect on all the wider issues that we're talking about anyway, in terms of people moving. So I hope he's taken seriously. He's rather a warm pope, and people warm up to him, and I think he should be taken seriously. Yeah,
he seems very grounded, doesn't he? I mean, not taking the Pope-mobile, taking an ordinary car, and a number of things that he's done, taking a room that isn't the nicest presidential suite and things like that. He does seem to, again, have very good sort of PR ideas. Let's finally go to the Bangkok Post. Nation's first MERS case strikes. This is a 75-year-old man quarantined after testing positive. How worried should we, in terms of globally, how worried should we be by this outbreak?
Well, outbreaks are outbreaks, and we should be worried at any rate. So in public health terms, we're always worried, and we should be on guard. This is, in this case, the risk factors are pretty clear. So age is a big factor, and those of us who are suffering with multiple things will be much more vulnerable than others. So in public health terms, those are very clear. This man was 75, and that's a very good example. The older we get, Simon, the harder it is to shake off things. So in terms of managing the public health issues, this looks like it's being contained and is manageable, but of course we should be on guard. I've always said, as I will say, I wish we had the same response for the Ebola crisis.
Absolutely. Well, it's hard, isn't it, to get the balance between taking something seriously like Ebola, which it seems like people were a little bit hesitant and reluctant to sort of get on board on top of that. And also, it's hard not to go overboard and to panic and to cause panic.
But this is when we look at the world, and people in West Africa will say, we're talking here about one 75-year-old man who died. But we talked about thousands dying in West Africa. Why wasn't that response there? So I think in terms of balance, we need to achieve a balance where we are equally responsive to different regions, so that if anything comes up, we're responding as quick as we can, so that there's no bias. And that's what the United Nations has. It looks like it has bias in responding to Asia, but actually not responding to Africa.
Yeah, all very interesting. Dorcas, thank you very much indeed for coming in, and
Thanks,
we'll no doubt see you again soon. Thanks a lot.